A shy black waitress noticed an elderly woman struggling to communicate in a crowded restaurant. While everyone else ignored her, this waitress did something that stopped the entire room. When the woman's billionaire son saw what happened, he broke down in tears. The afternoon sun poured through the tall windows of La Bella Vista, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, casting golden light across white tablecloths and crystal glasses that sparkled like diamonds. The sound of quiet conversation mixed with the gentle clink of silverware against fine china, creating a symphony of wealth and privilege that hummed through the elegant dining room. The air carried the scent of fresh flowers and expensive perfume, an atmosphere designed for people who never worried about the cost of anything. In the corner booth sat an elderly white woman, her silver hair perfectly styled, her designer dress speaking of money that stretched back generations. But her eyes, those eyes held something that money couldn't fix: isolation, confusion, and the desperate loneliness of someone trapped in silence while the world moved around her without pause. Before this story takes you deeper into what happened next, take just a moment. If you believe in kindness that sees beyond differences, in compassion that costs nothing but means everything, and in the power of simple human connection, please like this video. Share it with someone who needs to remember that beautiful souls still walk among us, and subscribe to Untold Kindness Journey. Your support keeps these stories alive, reminding the world that love speaks every language, even without words. Maya Thompson had been working at La Bella Vista for 3 months, her first real job since moving to the city from her small hometown. At 22 years old, she was quiet, almost painfully shy, the kind of person who apologized for taking up space and spoke so softly people often asked her to repeat herself. She'd grown up poor, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs and still barely kept the lights on. Maya knew struggle intimately, knew what it felt like to be invisible, to watch people look right through you as if you didn't exist. That's probably why she noticed the elderly woman when no one else did, when everyone else was too absorbed in their expensive meals and important conversations. To see someone struggling right in front of them, the woman had been trying to get her servers' attention for 10 minutes, waving her hand, pointing at the menu, her face growing more distressed with each passing moment. But the server, a young man with slicked back hair and an expression of perpetual boredom, kept walking past her table, deliberately ignoring her attempts to communicate. Other staff members did the same, their eyes sliding away when she tried to catch their attention, treating her like an inconvenience they hoped would simply disappear. Maya watched this from across the dining room, her heart squeezing tighter with each rejection the woman faced. She recognized that look, that desperate attempt to be seen, to be heard, to matter to someone, anyone. Maya wasn't assigned to that section. She wasn't supposed to approach tables that weren't hers. The head server had made that very clear when she started. Stay in your lane, don't overstep. Follow the hierarchy. But watching this woman's isolation, seeing her hands move in gestures that Maya suddenly recognized, something inside her shifted. She'd learned sign language in high school, taught by a deaf teacher who changed her life, who showed her that communication went deeper than words, that connection lived in the space between souls. Without thinking about consequences or rules or the head server's inevitable anger, Maya walked across the dining room toward the elderly woman's table. The woman looked up as Maya approached, her eyes wary at first, expecting another person who would pretend not to understand. Another rejection in a lifetime of being treated like her disability made her less than human. But then Maya's hands moved, fluid and graceful, forming signs that asked a simple question. "How can I help you?" The woman's entire face transformed. Her eyes widened, then filled with tears that spilled over and ran down her carefully powdered cheeks. Her hands flew up, signing rapidly, the relief pouring out of her like water from a broken dam. Finally, someone who could hear her even in the silence. Maya pulled out her order pad and began translating the woman's signs, asking questions, making suggestions, treating her exactly like she would any other customer, with respect, with patience, with the simple dignity of being seen as a whole person. The woman ordered slowly, savoring this rare moment of being understood. Asking about ingredients because she had allergies, requesting modifications because she had preferences, doing all the normal things people do in restaurants that she'd been denied simply because no one wanted to take the time to communicate differently. Maya wrote everything down carefully, asking clarifying questions in sign language, making sure she got every detail right. Other diners had started to notice. Conversations quieted. Heads turned. People watched this young black waitress in her simple uniform, communicating fluently with an elderly white woman in perfect American Sign Language, creating a pocket of connection in a room full of strangers. Some watched with curiosity, others with something that looked like shame, recognizing their own willingness to look away, to let someone struggle because helping required effort they weren't willing to give. The head server stood frozen by the kitchen door, torn between enforcing his precious rules and recognizing that something profound was happening that he didn't want to interrupt. Maya brought the woman's food personally, checking to make sure everything was correct, staying nearby in case she needed anything else. Throughout the meal, she stopped by the table several times, not because the woman called her, but because Maya wanted to make sure she felt cared for, wanted to give her something she'd probably been denied in countless other establishments. The woman ate slowly, her face holding an expression of peace that came from finally being treated like she belonged. When the meal ended, the woman signed her thanks repeatedly, her hands moving with emotion that transcended language. Maya signed back. "You are always welcome here." The woman's tears started fresh. That's when he walked in. A man in his 40s wearing a suit that probably cost more than Maya made in 6 months. His presence commanding immediate attention from every staff member, who suddenly straightened and smiled with the servile eagerness reserved for people whose tips could change lives. He scanned the dining room, his eyes finding the elderly woman, his face relaxing with relief. He strode toward her table, his expensive shoes clicking against marble floors, clearly someone used to the world parting before him. But then he saw Maya standing beside his mother, saw their hands moving in conversation, saw the expression on his mother's face, and he stopped walking. Just stopped, frozen in the middle of the dining room. His face went through a transformation that everyone in the room witnessed. Confusion first, not understanding what he was seeing. Then recognition, understanding that this waitress was signing with his mother. Then something broke open across his features, something raw and vulnerable, that men with that much money usually hid behind walls of control. His eyes filled with tears that he didn't bother to wipe away. His hand came up to cover his mouth, and his shoulders began to shake. Right there in the middle of La Bella Vista, this billionaire, whose name was probably on buildings downtown, started crying like a child who'd just witnessed a miracle. He walked slowly to the table, and Maya stepped back respectfully, but he reached out and gently took her hand, stopping her from leaving. His voice came out thick with emotion that he couldn't contain. "Do you know what you just did?" His mother's been coming to restaurants her whole life, and almost no one ever takes the time to communicate with her. They treat her like she's invisible, like her disability makes her less important than other customers. I've watched it break her heart over and over. And you just gave her something most people in this room probably take for granted. You gave her dignity. You gave her connection. You treated her like she matters. Maya's eyes filled with her own tears, overwhelmed by his reaction, by the weight of what her simple choice meant to these people. She signed to his mother. "Your son loves you very much." The woman signed back. "And now I love you too, sweet girl." The billionaire watched their exchange, more tears streaming down his face, not caring that half the restaurant was watching him, not caring about anything except this moment. This gift a shy waitress with barely anything to her name had given his mother simply because it was the right thing to do. What happened next became the talk of the city. The billionaire, whose name was James Whitmore and who owned half the commercial real estate downtown, didn't just leave Maya a generous tip. He sat down and talked with her for an hour, learning her story, her struggles, her dreams of someday becoming a teacher for deaf children. Within a week, he'd paid off her student loans completely. He established a full scholarship in her name at the local university. He hired her to run a new non-profit he created on the spot, focused on training service industry workers in basic sign language and disability awareness. Her salary was more than she'd imagined making in her entire life. But more than the money, more than the opportunities, James gave Maya something invaluable. He told her story everywhere he went, in boardrooms and charity galas and business meetings, talking about how a young woman with nothing showed more humanity in 5 minutes than most wealthy people showed in their entire lives. He made sure the world knew that true richness had nothing to do with bank accounts and everything to do with the size of someone's heart. Maya became a voice for change, proof that one person choosing kindness could create ripples that transformed everything around them.